welcome to Social Studies. We are moving forward from the American Revolution to Westward Expansion. All right, and in person, we've already talked a bit about what that means. What do you guys think that means? Westward Expansion. Big word. Hayden?
We get elbow room.
We get some elbow room, okay? We get to move west, past the mountains. We have room to spread out. And you'll learn that the colonists, well, they wanted to move west, but do you think life was going to be easy out there?
No.
Okay, picture this. Nothing is out west except for Native Americans and some fur trappers. That's about it. So if you were going to head out there, what would be some of the challenges? You're heading out basically into the wilderness to set up a new life. What would be hard? Angie? Predators. Oh yeah, we've got bears, mountain lions, all sorts of that. So that would be scary, not to mention snakes and things. Cadence? Food. What are you going to eat? If you don't settle down and start a farm, you just have to basically be a hunter-gatherer again, right? On your way out there. So you could hunt, but that's difficult, right? You got to make sure you have weapons and ammunition. Is there a store if you run out of ammunition and bullets, you can go buy more? Nope. Okay? So it was a hard life. So thinking into this, I want you to picture, people are heading out there. There's no roads. There's no stores. There's no houses. You're just heading to an unknown land. Okay? All right. On 62, all eyes in the book. We'll take questions after. Okay? I got to get started. All eyes in the book. Real quick.
If you had a bow, you could kill the animal and then get the arrow back.
So that might be a better method, right? It's a little more skill required. Liam, real fast.
This is what I do.
Hey.
I think this is smart. It might not be. Whenever I'm shooting darts at people, I only shoot them if they need to be shoot.
Okay, so you're not wasting things, right? You'd have to be very careful with what you've got.
People just shoot it out at once and they don't have any.
Okay. Now I can tell from today we've all been sleepy in math. I need everyone really sit up straight, put your feet on the ground. If you're feeling sleepy, you need to follow along, okay? This test is kind of tricky, so you need to make sure you're listening, okay? All right, top of page 62. First of all, we've got George Washington up there. So he helped us make a bunch of new rules for our country. And this kind of describes how we got started. And I'll be honest, some of it's kind of not super exciting, but you need to know this before we can move on, okay? Building a new nation. The 13 new states were not united in the way our country is today. What does that mean, if we're not united? Because I don't think everyone gets along today. Emma?
More people are really good to each other.
Okay. Do you think we even felt like we were a nation, Noah?
Not really.
Not really. For a long time, we'd been part of Britain, right? So we were kind of different. So people didn't really feel like we were all Americans. Everyone felt very different. All right. They were not used to working together. In 1781, the United States signed the Articles of Confederation, which is a big word for a document that basically gives us rules. Now we have the Constitution. So this was the document before the Constitution. A confederation is a union of states that agree to cooperate. So at that point, were we a group of states cooperating together? Mm-hmm. So we became a confederation. So that is all that word means, okay? Leaders from the states met in a Congress. So Congress is a word we hear now. A Congress is a group of people responsible for making a country's laws. So the people that go to Congress, we elect them. So maybe someday if I run for Congress, you'll say, oh, that's Mrs. Hare, I'm going to vote for her. If I get enough votes for Indiana, Indiana would send me on to represent our state and help make laws. Why do you think it's important that someone from Indiana goes to Washington, D.C. to help make laws? Josiah?
Because if someone who didn't go to Indiana doesn't know what our needs are, if we have any.
Right. So if we didn't have someone saying, hey, Indiana needs this and that, then no one would know. So it's important that every state has a representative. The states agreed the nation would be a republic, a form of government where everyone is represented. Okay, that's a great idea. But right now, I know we all know who was not at this point represented in making our rules and our laws. Who did we leave out of most things? Give me one, Hudson.
Martin Luther King.
Okay, so you're thinking black people basically, right? Okay, they were left out, right? At this point, they were still slaves. They weren't even free people in our country. What other groups of people were left out? Josiah?
Native Americans.
Native Americans, the people who lived here first. Abby?
Wasn't it
We're missing a group of people that makes up about half of our classroom, including me, and you, and Angie, and Chloe, and Emma, and Madeline. Nope. Noah? Women, okay? Women, Native Americans, basically any nationality that wasn't white, you didn't get to make rules. So when I'm talking about they're setting up a republic where everyone's represented, they thought they were doing that, but really it was just kind of setting it up for rich white men. But the theory's still good, right? Everyone gets a say. Are we closer to that now than we used to be? Yeah, women can vote now. It doesn't matter what skin color you've got, everyone can vote. So we're getting closer. All right, reading on, back to the story. But soon they were arguing. They disagreed about money, so each state was printing its own money. They also disagreed about who owned the land in the West. Delegates from, I'm at the bottom paragraph. Delegates from each state met in 1787 in Philadelphia to help solve the problems. A delegate is someone who represents a group of people. So it's kind of like a Congress member. One moment, people at home. Okay, so a delegate is someone who represents a group of people. The delegates plan to revise the Articles of Confederation. So they're going to make a new law for the nation. They don't like that one anymore. So they created a new government. The delegates spent the summer of 1787 working out the details of this new plan or government called a constitution. Okay, now if we look over here, all right, friends at home, this is going to be a little bumpy. All right, and you can't really see them very well. I will bring the camera over to you one of the next couple days. We have documents up here that show the Declaration of Independence, and this is the Constitution, okay? So this is what we're going to start talking about now, and that document is one of the most important documents in our country. So that is the Constitution. All right, so they're writing out this new plan. It took them like a whole summer to write it. The delegates still did not agree on everything. They compromised on many issues. What's a compromise? I ask you guys to do that a lot when we work in our science teams. Madeline?
So like on science, when we disagree on his plan, we'll like take each of the plan or work things out. Like if we're playing soccer and the other one wants to play basketball, you play a little bit of basketball and a little bit of soccer.
Yeah. Okay. A compromise. It kind of means nobody's really happy. Everyone's okay, right? No one got exactly their way, but everyone kind of got their way. Emma?
It's kind of when me and my brothers watching like something, like we take turns.
There you go. You can take turns, or you could say, well, I don't want to watch that and you don't want to watch this. We can both agree that we kind of want to watch this, right? That's a compromise. So they had to compromise on things because they could not agree. But most delegates agreed to sign the U.S. Constitution in September of 1787. One by one, each state ratified the new Constitution. To ratify, that just means approve it. So they had to read it and say, yeah, we like it. Go for it. The states ratified the Constitution in June 1788. And from there, we were an official country. We had a Constitution, the same one we use now. So that was a long time ago, right? So that document is still important. All right, next page, page 63. The new nation grows. One of the accomplishments of the Articles of Confederation was the plan for settling lands west of Pennsylvania. Okay, so we're talking about lands out west, right? Beyond that line from the proclamation of 1763. The government passed several ordinances to help organize settlement, especially in the Northwest Territory. An ordinance is a law. The Northwest Territory consisted of present-day states Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, and part of Minnesota. Did we hear something familiar in there? Okay, Eric, what'd you hear?
Indiana.
So this land, the Northwest Territory, is where we live now. It's basically the land all around the Great Lakes. Okay, so it was an important chunk. Was this part of our nation at that point? Think carefully. Was it one of our colonies, Noah? No. We had 13 little colonies along the shore, and that was it. All right, so the Northwest Territory, I'll say it again. It's Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, and part of Minnesota. So we'll look at a map of that later. The Land Ordinance of 1784 served as the basis for future ordinances. And basically, it divided up land. So I'm going to stop reading the text because this part is so boring I can't hardly stand it. Look at the very bottom of your page. We got that diagram, okay? So look at the diagram while I describe it. And if you don't have a book, you can kind of look look over his shoulder at his. Kind of look at her picture, okay? So look at that picture. How many miles is each side of that square? Hudson?
6.
6 miles. So we've got a 6 by 6 mile square, and this is going to function as kind of like a township, okay? So each big square was each square represented a township and was 6 square miles. Each township was divided into 36 sections. Each one's 1 mile. So look at box number 1. That is a square mile. Okay, each side of the square is a mile. Do you think you could put a lot of farming and things in a square mile?
Yeah.
That's a big space. So a mile, you might not even know how to think about that distance. If you ran 4 laps around a track, that's a mile. So each edge of your property is that long. Okay, so you've got a pretty big square to work with. All right, so now look at the picture. You have to know that that is called a township. Okay, you guys memorizing that word? It's on your test. A township.
I can't hear it.
Township. It'll be in a while. Don't worry about that for now. But a township is important. All right, go ahead and flip your page. Now this page gets a little more interesting. So if you've been dozing on me, wake back up and pay attention. Hayden. All right, top of page 64. First of all, that picture, we've got settlers in the Northwest Territory cutting down trees. All right, why are they cutting down those trees? Emma?
So they can build the fort.
Okay, they need to build forts. What else do we need to live in out there? Emma, Madeline?
Houses.
Houses. You think you need stables for your animals?
Yeah.
Yep. Angie, what else?
Fence. The elements of the animals don't get in.
Fences. Because remember, if you got a little piece of land, you've got a mile by a mile, so you've got this little homestead.
And so, like, maybe wolves don't eat the animals.
Yeah, if you've got chickens and livestock, wolves, coyotes, all that, they would eat all your animals.
Fire.
Firewood, okay. Now, once you've chopped the trees down, what can you put where they used to be? Eric?
New trees.
You could plant new trees. Cadence?
More room.
Well, you'd have more room, so if you needed any space, you'd have it. Whoa, Hayden?
You could, like, for the stumps, you could make them seats.
Okay. Think more about, like, what did the Native Americans eventually do to make life easier? Josiah?
Fire and also, like, cities.
Okay, we need space for cities. We're missing one big thing. At this point, when our settlers are hungry and they need to eat, they're going to have to go hunting. Farmland, okay? So you have to cut all the trees down to plant crops. Shh. We have to cut all the trees down to plant crops. All right, top of page 64. With all that in mind, here we go. The Northwest Ordinance in 1787 set up rules for creating states in the Northwest Territory. It stated that the territory be divided into not less than 3 nor more than 5 states. So at this point, Indiana wasn't a state. It's just a big chunk of land. So they said we need at least 3, but no more than 5 states. An individual territory could become a state when its population reached 60,000 people. So that's kind of a lot for back then, right? There weren't a lot of people that lived there yet. The ordinance also said slavery was forever outlawed in the Northwest Territory. Now this is important. Shh, a lot of you are just blurting out. What does that mean? Slavery is outlawed in the Northwest Territory. Madeline?
It's against the law.
It's against the law. So, how do you guys feel about that? Good, right? That's one thing we did right at the beginning. Now, at the same time, though, I need you to remember, in the rest of the colonies and the South, all up along the Atlantic coast, slavery was going like full force, okay? But people knew in our Northwest Territory, we're not doing it, okay? So that was against the law, so that's good. Slavery is the act of owning people and forcing them to work without pay. So the Northwest Territory was an area rich with resources such as water, fertile soil, and wood. They began moving into the region as early as the 1770s. These settlers came from the east. They settled along the Ohio River Valley. All right, I'm skipping down to that next paragraph. Some of the land in the region was set aside for soldiers who had never been paid for their service during the American Revolution. Do you think that's fair? Think about it a minute. The soldiers who fought for the colonist side, some of them didn't get paid. But we weren't really a country yet, right? So those who didn't get paid, they got a piece of land. Do you think that was pretty fair? Yeah. So that was a pretty fair way to repay the people who had fought to make our country a country. The rest of the land that they didn't give to soldiers was sold to people who wanted to farm or build new towns. So that's when those ordinances come in place, okay? You need to know the territory ordinance, or township ordinance. In the early 1880s, pioneers began coming to the Northwest Territory by the thousands. The government encouraged people to farm. They knew the nation could only grow if many people were raising and growing food. The government sold the land at very low prices, so many people could afford farms. As you learned, the ordinances of the government, remember those are laws. So the laws of the government, as you learned, the ordinances of the government passed helped the nation grow. Another way the nation grew was when President Thomas Jefferson bought the Louisiana Territory from the French in 1803. All right, so now we're going to watch a quick brain pop about this. This is one of my favorite stories of our country, and we are going through it fast. In 5th grade, you'll get the longer version. But Thomas Jefferson, does anyone remember what number of president he was in our nation? I told you last week. Third. So it was George Washington, John Adams, then Thomas Jefferson. He said to the French people, remember little tiny Napoleon on our no elbow room? He said, we need more land. Our country's growing. And France owned most of the West. So we bought it from France. And it was called the Louisiana Purchase. Next time, please ask, okay? So that was called the Louisiana Purchase. So, friends at home and everybody, we're going to watch a brain pop about the Louisiana Purchase. And this is when Thomas Jefferson bought a bunch of land. You'll see how much land. And we got a really good deal on it. Okay? So, please stay quiet while we watch the video. Hold on. I'm still in the middle of teaching your phone.
Dear Tim and Moby, can you tell us about Lewis and Clark? Thanks, Mrs. McGowan's class. Meriwether Lewis and William Clark were two of the most famous explorers in American history. From 1804 to 1806, they led an expedition through the newly annexed Western Territory of the United States. They traveled 7,000 Western Territory of the United States. Western Territory.
Sorry. Okay. That purple part. Okay, that purple is all the Louisiana Purchase. So the colonies are along here. Okay, so this is all America. This is the Northwest Territory. So Indiana's right here. So this was all the land we had at this point. And people wanted to go west. Okay? Does anyone think they know who this yellow might still be? Noah? It's a good guess. Spanish. Good. So Spain, they mostly stayed in the southern parts of our country and further south. So we've talked about this. Why do people in Mexico, in South America, in Central America, why do they speak Spanish? Because Spain is a country in Europe. Cadence?
Because they didn't speak to that language.
Yeah, when the Spanish came and kind of took all the land, just like everyone did in North America, they gave them their language, basically. They spoke lots of different native languages. So people that live in Mexico now, if you go back before Spain came, they did not speak Spanish. They had native languages from Mexico, just like the Native Americans. So when I was little, I did not get that. And I didn't know why they called it Spanish, okay? But that is why. It came from Spain. So Mexico has all, or Spain has all of this. This is Mexico. Here's California. All right? So purple land is our new land.
But that's where we live now.
They actually made a movie.
Voices off.
Of the United States. They traveled 7,400 miles from the mouth of the Missouri River to the Pacific Ocean and back. All right, enough of the credits. In 1803, President Thomas Jefferson approved the Louisiana Purchase, the sale of a huge piece of land from France to the U.S., stretching from the Gulf of Mexico to Canada. With the stroke of a pen, our country doubled in size. But neither the French nor the Americans knew exactly how big the territory was or what it was like. But the hundreds of indigenous nations who lived there did. So Jefferson put together an expedition to gather info about the land and contact the native people. Jefferson also wanted to take over the fur trade in the West. To lead the group, Jefferson chose his own secretary, Army Captain Meriwether Lewis. And Lewis chose fellow Army officer William Clark to be his partner. Lewis and Clark assembled the Corps of Discovery, a team of 31 people and 1 dog. The Corps was made up entirely of soldiers, with one exception. A black man named York, who was enslaved to William Clark. The Corps set off near St. Louis in May 1804, following the Missouri River westward in 3 boats. During these first days, Clark was busy navigating and making maps. Meanwhile, Lewis was often on shore, studying rocks, animals, and plant life. Over the course of the next 2 years, they encountered more than 50 Native American nations. They held ceremonial meetings, following guidelines dictated by President Jefferson. Like this meeting with a group of Hidatsa chiefs, they were urged to trade freely with Americans and accept U.S. authority. Yeah, early on they had a tense encounter with the Lakota, also called the Teton Sioux. The Lakota chiefs weren't impressed by their gifts and presentations. They demanded that the Corps pay a much larger toll to continue up the river. When they tried to prevent the boats from leaving, weapons were drawn. Fortunately, Chief Black Buffalo stepped in and defused the crisis. But in most cases, meetings with the native people stayed friendly. In fact, the Corps depended on the people they met for survival. By late October, the expedition reached the Mandan and Hidatsa peoples in what is now North Dakota. This was the trade hub of the northern plains for Europeans as well as many native peoples. Winter was setting in, so the Corps built a fort nearby to wait out the season. Living among the Hidatsa was Toussaint Charbonneau, a French fur trader. One of his wives was a Lenni Shoshone woman, Sacagawea. When Sacagawea was a little girl, her village had been attacked by a Hidatsa war party and she was kidnapped. Like many war hostages, she was later sold to Charbonneau. Lewis and Clark invited the pair to join their expedition as translators. Come spring, they signed on, bringing along their newborn son, Jean-Baptiste. Sacagawea was only about 16, but she quickly became essential to the Corps' survival. She knew which plants to gather for food and medicine, and she acted as a guide. She also smoothed the way with native groups the Corps encountered. Having a woman with a baby along seemed like proof of the explorers' peaceful intentions. That summer, the Corps reached the Great Falls of the Missouri River. It was 80 feet high and 900 feet wide, and the only way through was around. They carried 3 boats and all their supplies on the 18-mile detour. It took 31 days in 100-degree heat, broken by massive storms, including hail. 2 months later, they faced their next big challenge, the Rocky Mountains. To help them across, Sacagawea negotiated a trade for horses with her people, the Shoshone. In August, the group began a dangerous trek over the snow-covered peaks. Food supplies ran low, and the men and horses nearly starved to death. But after 11 desperate days, they finally emerged on the other side. They were saved by the Nimipu, also called the Nez Perce, who helped them recover. Finally, after a year and a half of traveling, they reached the Pacific Ocean. They spent the winter in the territory of the Clackamas people in what is now Oregon, and then set out for home in March of 1806. When they passed back through the Hidatsa villages, Sacagawea, Jean-Baptiste, and Charbonneau stayed behind. In September, the rest of the expedition finally made it back to St. Louis. It had been nearly 2.5 years since they'd left. Well, for one thing, the Corps was the first group from the U.S. to reach the Pacific by land. They also produced the first accurate maps of the American Northwest, over 140 during the course of the journey. They documented hundreds of species of plants and animals, established friendly relations with dozens of Native American nations, and recorded reams of information about their peoples and cultures, and sparked a young country's imagination, inspiring its expansion into the western frontier. Tragically, that would result in great hardship for many of the peoples who'd helped them on their journey. Like so much in American history, opportunity for some came at the cost of great loss for others. In ways they could never anticipate, Lewis and Clark's historic journey changed this country forever. Where'd you learn to fiddle anyway?
Don't tell
Right.
anyone else.
All right, thank you guys. I will see you tomorrow. We'll keep learning about moving west. Have a great day.